Daniel. We'll try to finish up chapter 2, and this is pretty wild. Daniel is going to be talking about, as Blake brought up, world events that are taking place right now in his time, and also future events. And yet, our story of Daniel is also very personally challenging. So studying this together is good practice, because there are huge biblical events going on around you. Do you guys see that in the world? I'm not saying I know when the end's coming or that kind of thing, but what I'm saying is these are biblical events. Even people that are not Christians see it and have questions about it. So we must keep an eye on the skies, so to speak, for his return, for the rapture. And we're to be ready. But at the same time, we're to keep an eye on world events. And we are to stay in the present and not let up on our personal lives, knowing that God has a purpose and a plan for us. So it's like, in fact, everybody should right now think, be aware, recognize God knows you. He knows your situation. He has a plan for you. And nobody's situation in here is quite as bad as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. Yet God had an answer for them. And he went with them in the fire. So, and yet at the same time as that's going on, it's very personal to them. Very personal. Yet at the same time, there are these world events going on that God is managing. Yet he still cares about what's going on in your life. So we're going to do both those things at once. We're going to do that today. And we're going to live like that too. Is that we're going to live with purpose and intent individually. Yet we're going to know and look around and see what's going on in the world and how it applies. So one of the things we've talked about is entering the school of Daniel. And nobody is too young or too old for this. Is that to learn from how Daniel lived. Because Daniel is a unique and special character in the Bible. Is that very few have nothing negative said about them. And I don't think, as I've read through this, do you see anything negative when you read through Daniel? Anything negative about Daniel? Doesn't mean that he wasn't a sinner. Doesn't mean that he didn't obviously need a substitute to die in his place. But at the same time, there's something here in Daniel's example that we can follow. We want to look at what was Daniel's secret to impacting 3 world leaders, the most powerful men in the world. Yet he was a nobody in one sense, but he influenced them greatly. And what was it about him that had this kind of impact? And I think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, I think the one that helped get them to where they could face what they faced with the courage and faith that they faced it was being around Daniel. I think they were discipled, trained by. They were, in one sense, they were all in this school together, but they were also in Daniel's school. And I think these are the things that rubbed off from him. And if we can understand that we're not just responsible for ourselves before God, but we impact people around us way more than we recognize. That's been a theme lately. Have y'all noticed that? That has come up a lot. And I believe that God wants us to be aware of that and live with that in mind. So, y'all remember some things about Daniel that made him so... And I don't want us just to think of things about Daniel and that's it. We're answering questions. But I want us to think about things about Daniel and learn from him so that we can put these things in our own life. Y'all remember anything about Daniel? You had a little summary last week, Jesse. Do you remember what your summary was the week before last? It was 2 weeks. What was it?
Pray, praise, do, glorify.
There you go. Daniel prayed first. That's what he did. And he prayed for the impossible. He believed God for impossible things. Now, I like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego's approach, and we'll get to here today. They were like I absolutely, with my whole heart, believe God can do this. But I'm not trying to put God in a corner. He can do it however He wants. But I know He can rescue us from the fire, and I'm going to trust Him. But no matter what, if He decides to rescue, you see, let's say they're going the other way. Let's say they got burned to a crisp. Then today we'll be reading about the martyrs, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, how they bravely went to their death and brought honor to God in that. But in this same way, they brought honor to God. Either way it went, they were going to bring honor to God. And so, that's the kind of faith that I want to have. I want you to have. And so, that doesn't apply just to big things like being thrown in the fiery furnace. It applies to your fiery trial that you are going through now, or the one that's next in line for you to go through. Will you face it in that same way? And didn't you love the way those guys treated the king, even when he was throwing him in the furnace? How they spoke to him with respect. In other words, like, this is the king. God's the one that puts kings in place. So I'll give him the respect due him. But I will not disobey God to obey him. Do you see that balance? They had it just exactly right. What else about Daniel did we learn? Y'all thinking about this?
I feel like he was consistent.
He was.
Like they mentioned, maybe this is later, but like he prays 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Like, so it seemed like he was always just doing the same thing.
One thing, a way I've kind of thought about that is Daniel shows up. So, you know what I mean? Like, if he shows up in the morning to meet with God. He shows up 3 times a day to meet with God. He showed up to the king. He showed up for his friends. He was there. He showed up not just for his believing friends, his unbelieving friends. He always showed up. He was reliable. He was obedient. He was faithful. Again, always, it's because he boldly asked for the impossible. He knew God. You see, his purposes, like his purpose in life was not for himself. He wasn't out to get ambitious, to get the highest position he could get, to the most money, the most power, the most friends. No, his purpose was to honor God and please him. And that shaped everything that he did. That was his now we can have a purpose in life to do God's will. And what is God's will? We get more clearer view of God's will as the Bible goes on, and we know now that we are God's ambassadors. We are His representatives. We are to reveal Him. We are to reconcile the world to God. That's one of His purposes in the world is to reconcile people to Him. So that can be our central purpose, and we can do that by living in a sense, a holy life, by staying following closely to God so we can do His will, but having that His purpose in the mind for how we live. So that's a way that we can be like Daniel. One thing about Daniel that I see was he had clarity. If you notice, here's something I've noticed. When somebody is in a fog, they don't know what to do or which way to go. Not always, but sometimes it's because there's sin, and there's a separation between them and God, and they need to repent of that sin. And when they repent of that sin, all of a sudden things become clear. And that's the way Daniel lived, with clarity, because he stayed current in his relationship with God. We get confused when we drift from God. Oh yeah, thanks, Micah. That was like one of the biggest ones. His humility. It's like, if I had one thing happen to me like Daniel, I'm pretty sure I'd have got prideful. Just one. He went from a 14-year-old boy, captured, to being one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. We're talking about Babylon was an awesome. And we're going to see in a little bit here today. They built they had a wall around the city Babylon. They wasn't just a city; they had a kingdom outlying also. But they had this huge berm. On top of that berm, they had a wall. They felt like they could not be sieged. that method, that battle, the way of doing battle back then, of sieging the city. Because they had a river flowing into the city. They had a wall that chariots could ride side by side around on top of the wall, the whole circumference of the city. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, these fabulous stuff they built. They had some of the great wonders of the world that they were responsible. They were great builders. Nebuchadnezzar was ambitious, great builder, conqueror. So there were, to be involved and be closely associated with that is intoxicating. That kind of power, that kind of money, and we've seen it happen over and over and over. People we think are fine, just fine, preachers or athletes or politics, anybody that gets that kind of power and money, they usually go south. Daniel didn't. He stayed humble. Always gave glory to God. Always gave credit to God. So now, last week the dream. Remember, the king had a dream. This great statue, and he wanted his wise men and sorcerers and all those guys to tell him what the dream was and then interpret it. Impossible task. Daniel, one of the Magi, he was with the Magi. He said, "Give us a minute, king. We'll go to God." Goes to God. He tells the king what his dream was without being told the dream. He tells him what the dream was, and then he interprets the dream. And the king knows truth when he hears it. He's a discerning guy. You can see through other situations. He heard what Daniel had to say and what the meaning of the dream was, and he falls prostrate before Daniel and says, "Your God is the only true God." Now, we're going to figure out, does this mean that he's a believer in God now, a follower of God? And what does his dream mean anyway? So that's where we are today. Verses 31 to 35 of Daniel chapter 2. We'll see how far we get.
Your Majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like shade on the threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth.
Okay, so even though from this, first of all, these the statue represents kingdoms. Just so you don't think we're making that up, Garrett, would you read verses 39 to 40?
After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, where iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others.
Okay, there's rarely agreement on things like the meaning of things sometimes when they're sort of symbolic. But this has agreement all the way back to the great historian, not the biblical writer, just a historian, Josephus, from a Jewish historian, and even him back in the time of Jesus identified these kingdoms, and there is agreement today on what these kingdoms represent, because we're going to identify the kingdoms today, and then we'll get in more detail as they show up again and again throughout the book. So it's clear that the statue represents kingdoms that were to follow King Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. And there's only one group that really gets this wrong. I'll tell you who that group is of believers that get this wrong, but we'll get into that in a minute. The first kingdom. What?
I said charismatics. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, I'll tell you who it was. It's the replacement theologists who say that the church has replaced Israel.
That makes sense.
They get this mixed up. And so that group gets a lot of things wrong because they get that wrong. A lot of things that follow. And I'm going to give you some reasons why they get it wrong today. I'm not judging them in that sense. I understand some reasons why, but they really need to go deeper into the Bible to understand clearly that the promises to Israel were not based on behavior. They were eternal promises. And so we'll get into that in a minute. We've already touched on that some before, obviously, in the past. So, Kingdom 1 here is Babylon, the golden head. As we mentioned before, a glorious kingdom, amazing builders. And as we go down the statue, we'll see the metals become less valuable till we get all the way down to the feet of clay and iron. But as you go down the statue, the kingdoms also get stronger. The kingdoms get larger landmass. So they're bigger, more powerful kingdoms, but not quite as glorious as Babylon. So that's kind of the sequence as we go down. So Daniel, though, in chapter 7, is going to have a dream. It's not the king having a dream. He's going to have a dream about these same kingdoms, but they're going to be represented by beasts. And we'll kind of try to identify those beasts a little bit as we go through here, along with the present dream. So these future kingdoms are mentioned in chapter 7 and chapter 11. And the beast will show up again in Revelation chapter 13. So we study Daniel, and we get to Revelation, we'll understand some things a lot more clearly. Because Daniel's going to give us even a timetable for how these things take place. So Babylon is represented as the head, the golden head. In chapter 7, Babylon is represented as a winged lion. So if you read ahead, then at least you can know that, Blake, that those two are the same. Kingdom 2 is represented by the chest and arms of silver. And in chapter 7, it's represented as a bear. And the kingdom that's talking about is the Medo-Persian Empire, who the king of that empire was Cyrus. So, Kingdom 3, as we go down the statue, is represented by bronze. And it's Greece and Alexander the Great, represented by a winged leopard. Now, if you know anything about Alexander the Great, it's an amazing story. And he, young, 21 years old, when he started conquering the world, and basically conquered the known world by the time he's 26. And so the leopard here, I think, represents the speed in which Greece, Alexander the Great, really leading that, with which they conquered the Babylon and all the kingdoms around also. So represented by a leopard with 4 heads in chapter 7. The 4 heads represent 4 generals, because Alexander, while he accomplished a lot young, he also died young. And the kingdom got divided into 4 kingdoms, still one kingdom, but 4 divisions. And one of those kings was Antiochus. You know this guy, Micah. The Antiochus. Am I saying it? I've got his name. I'm not saying it. Antiochus Epiphanes. Are you all familiar with this guy? He was a kind of a forerunner, a early Antichrist type figure. He's the one that later in chapter 8 that he went into the temple and he did an abomination of desolation. He sacrificed a pig on the altar in the temple, the Jewish temple. And later in Revelation, there's going to be the Antichrist is going to do that same act later. And he's going to be an enemy at that time of the Jews. He's going to pretend to be a friend of the Jews at first. Okay, am I confusing y'all absolutely, or are y'all still with me? Okay, that was Kingdom 3. Kingdom 4, as we move down the statue, the Kingdom of Iron. Who's that? Rome. That is that. It is pretty obvious. It's represented by iron, and Rome is later is going to be represented by the dragon that has iron teeth and 10 horns on his head. So it's represented by 2 things there. And now that the legs of iron, that's the last kingdom, there's going to be a break in time there. So that's after Kingdom 4, there's going to be a break in time. And you know, in 70 AD, the Jews were they were already conquered by the Romans, but they still had the province of Judea. But in 70 AD, the Jews were scattered to the wind. No more Israel. They were gone. And so that, in a sense, began the church age. So it's a gap in what we're looking at with these world kingdoms. So there's a gap there, but there's going to be another human kingdom that is yet to come. And that's the feet of iron mixed with clay and the 10 toes. You should also think about the 10 horns that were on the dragon, which represents Rome. So there's going to be a 10-nation commonwealth that is a future kingdom to come. That'll be after the church age. In other words, that's after the rapture. So that will be the last worldly kingdom, the feet of iron and clay, and that's going to be ruled by the Antichrist, the little horn that's going to show up later from the dragon. So that's why people say that the Antichrist will come out of Europe. It will come out of the Europeans, out of the revived Roman Empire. So there's many references. Let's read a few references about this. Who's reading next? Is that Matrix? Psalm 2, 4-6. Dave, Isaiah 11:10. Blake, Revelation 22, 3-5. This is about that the feet of iron mixed with clay is the final human kingdom. And notice in Daniel's interpretation of the dream, there's a stone cut out of the mountain, not of human hands, that crushes the statue. That all throughout Scripture, Jesus is represented as a rock, as a stone, and that He is going to crush all these human kingdoms, and He is going to be an eternal and final kingdom. And that kingdom's introduction will be the millennial kingdom, that 1,000-year reign of Christ on this earth. That's just the introduction to His eternal kingdom where He will reign forever. Y'all with me so far? So in Daniel 9, which we will get, the Matrix says, "Nah, you lost me there. you lost me at Nebuchadnezzar." In Daniel 9, we are going to get the most detailed. We'll get the most detailed chronological time frame of end times in Daniel. Daniel's going to lay it out. It's in chapter 9, and it's going to even use years about how many years we have left, but there's a gap in time of unknown length. So, and in that description is where we will find a little more information about the Antichrist, a little more information about the Antichrist signing a treaty with Israel. In other words, for all this stuff to take place, Israel has to become a nation again. Do y'all know what a nation is? You ever think about this? What is a nation? A nation is a group of people that have a government, that have borders, right? A sovereign nation that are responsible for themselves. And Israel has become a nation again. So let's read those verses. So if Jesus is going to come back and reign on this earth, where is He going to do it from? Jerusalem. So Jerusalem must be a city. It must be in the state, the country of Israel. Israel must be a nation. So let's read those verses.
He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord will then He will speak to them in His wrath, and call them in His fury, saying, "As for me, I've set my king on Zion, my holy hill."
Where He said His king on where? Where is Zion?
Israel.
Do y'all ever hear the term Zionist? Like spoken in a really negative kind of way? What is Zionist? Is that like a colonizer? Do y'all know what a Colonizer, that's always spoken of in negative terms also. What's a colonizer? What's a country that's a colonizer?
You take over the United States.
What's that?
Every single country that's ever existed.
I didn't ask you to defend anything. I just asked what it was. You don't have to defend colonizer. What is a colonizer?
It's a bad word.
All right.
It exports their frame of government and their frame of beliefs to another country.
Okay, so that's pretty good, Dave. And so either by convincing or by warfare, right? And how do you know a country's a colonizer?
They colonies.
So how do you know there's colonies? What if they're not colonies anymore? What if they're their own country now? How do you know that they're okay? In the simple thing, it's the language they speak, right? So you notice that French is spoken like all over Africa. Those aren't French nations. Why do they speak French? They were colonized at one time, right? English is spoken all over the world, right? So England colonized. United States colonized. After we became a colony, we also colonized, right? We took the rest of the United States. English is spoken all over the world. Spanish.
We haven't stopped yet.
Spanish is spoken all over. I'm just trying to listen. Spanish is spoken all over the world, right? A Zionist are those that believe Israel should be their own nation. Because if people think of Israel, where's Hebrew spoken? Israel. Israel is being condemned for being a colonizer. But really, historically, in a sense of who they are, right, after they have the land, that Hebrew is spoken right there. It's not spoken all over the world. Zionists are those that believe that Israel are to be their own nation, and it's a desire of Jewish people to be in Israel. And those that are against Zionists, generally speaking, are those that are against Israel being a nation. That they don't have a right to be a nation. Now, Israel became a nation by one of the few, when the UN may have done something right in the very beginning. But they and God himself gave the right for Israel to be a nation again. So that's basically the difference between colonizing countries and Zionists. If that makes sense. Israel was going to be a nation again, and Israel is a nation now for the first time since 1948 in however long. And it must be a nation again because the king that God puts into place is going to be rule and reign from Zion, Israel, Jerusalem to be exact. Okay. Daniel 2:40. No, wait, we have more verses to read.
Yeah. Isaiah, I think it's 11:10.
Yeah.
In that day, the heir to David's throne will be a banner of salvation to all the world. The nations will rally to him, and the land where he lives will be a glorious place.
Okay, so he will rule from Jerusalem. It will not just be Jews that he will rule, and it will not be just Jews that come and are, in a sense, worshiping. It will be Gentiles, it will be people from the whole world.
No longer will there be any curse. The throne of God and the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. There will be no more night. They will not need the light of the lamp or the light of the sun, for the Lord God will give them light, and they will reign forever and ever.
And was there one more? Was there a Revelation verse? Did I give you anybody?
So that was Revelation.
Oh, okay.
Revelation,
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
3-5.
That was it. That was one. Okay, so that's the stone. That's talking about the stone that will break. All the nations will be defeated, and Jesus will rule. It will be an eternal kingdom. It will be the final kingdom. And so that lays out in a sense, it's kind of amazing really, but it lays out in a sense, these are the future events. We have our last kingdom mentioned in here of Rome. We have a gap in time, just to give it a name, the church age. That doesn't mean the church rules. Now, there's the group of people that get confused. They say the church has replaced Israel, and the church age will we will hand the keys. We will take over the world. So, that denies Israel being a nation again. And so they just have things confused there. So, let's go on Daniel 2, 46, 48.
Sorry, what was it?
Daniel 2. Wait, did we already read that?
No.
46 to 48. Yeah.
Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you are able to reveal this mystery." Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men.
So, did the king believe?
No, not necessarily.
That's a good answer. No, he acknowledged God as God. He acknowledged Daniel as knowing God, as his man. He acknowledged the true God, and he was impacted, and he responded emotionally. But it doesn't appear that his heart truly changed, because we're going to see what he does here in just a minute. But in fact, it seems to take a few big instances like this, and then it does seem like the king's heart does change. But it doesn't appear that it happens just yet. It doesn't appear that he had an Abraham moment of belief and then reckoned as and accepted as righteous. It was going to take a couple more dramatic events in his life. He saw the truth, but he was resistant to fully yielding to that truth. So we're going to see some contrast here in this story. Contrast of the king and contrast of Daniel and his buddies. There's going to be some things that we can see that help us to clarify how we are to live. So let's look at Daniel's response to the king's response. Daniel 2:49. I don't know. Have you read, Gary?
Yeah.
Oh, baby, you're up.
Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed, why do I get the names? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court.
So here's something another thing we can learn about Daniel is his response to this is that he didn't forget his friends. In the heat of the moment, the glories laid it on him in a sense, and he was saying, "Oh king, don't forget about my friends here. Let's give them the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, and also these other guys, the other magi, and all these guys that are not followers of God." He said, "Let's treat them fairly." And the king did. They were not executed or whatever. So Daniel remembered his friends, both believers and non-believers. He was faithful. He was a faithful and loyal friend. Now, years later, after this, it seems that the king could not get that dramatic dream out of his head. And over time, his pride went to work on his thoughts. And he kind of transformed that dream to appeal to his own ego. Now, some of this is my interpretation of what's going on here in the king's head. So I'm not saying I read that in here or by any commentary either. So the king did something odd in that he built a statue. Now, this is not the first time we've seen the idea of a statue. I think it came from his original dream that he had that was from God. But he transformed it to his own advantage. And you'll notice that in the dream that God gave him, it was just the head that was golden, glorious. He made the whole statue gold. In other words, he's going to preserve his glory not going to end at his kingdom. Like he wants, I think it's representing both himself, his gods, and his kingdom that he wants people to bow down to. And he put the whole thing made out of gold, not just the head. And there's so many things we get out of how the king handled it and how Daniel handled it. And the king was given a gift. He was given this dream, and he misused it. How many times are we given something from God that's to be used for good, and we twist it, and we use it to our own advantage? It could be a gifting, an ability, and we end up using it just for our own glory, for our own self, when God meant us to use it for His purposes. And we're going to see the king do this in a couple of different ways. Let's go. You know, what time do we usually finish? What? 1:30. So I think we can get through this. Are y'all still okay? Okay.
No.
Jack's got sleeping going on over in the corner, so we're probably good. Let's read 1 through 12. Is that you, Micah? Or is that?
I think so.
Okay.
King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue, 90 feet high. Sorry, give me 1 second. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 60 cubits high and 60 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, and advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affair of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, who pay no attention to you. Your Majesty may neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up."
Yeah.
We have a couple of themes here, both personal and kind of worldwide themes. You notice this is Babylon, which traces its roots back to the Tower of Babel. And you see in this, notice every tongue, every nation to bow down, that trying to bring all this thing together again and to bow down before this one image. And that's going on today. That's still going on. That is a theme. It's a worldwide historical theme. And then one day, God's going to remove His hand and let it happen. And that's when things fall apart. But so that you see that theme going on. Another theme you see going on is it's the Jews' fault. You saw that. You see that in Germany. You see that here in the United States. You see it all over the place. That there's this odd kind of thing, and some people say, well, it's true. Well, maybe some of it's true. I'm sure there's a portion of truth in things, but at the same time, there is a conspiracy against the Jews, even though the Jews are identified as being the conspiracy most every place, everywhere. But that there is a movement because Satan is against those people, for sure. The other theme we get here is Well, let's read verses 13 to 15 about the king. Are we back? We might be to either Lori or Brady.
Jackson's turn.
Yeah.
3:13.
13 to 15. Yeah.
15. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and that word. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and
Abed-nego,
that you are not not serve my God and worship the image of God I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand."
Guess I should have had Brady read.
Hey, it's okay.
There are a couple things here, if we can try to get through this. The king likes these guys. He knows them by name. These guys that are against him, he knows who they are, and the king is filled with rage. There's this contrast we're going to get between the king and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. And the king is out for his purposes. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego are out for God's purposes. And notice, when you go against somebody who has their own flesh desire, and you stand in their way, there's going to be rage. Irrational anger. It could be something as simple as, hey, I'm going to get my Sunday afternoon nap. I've got my comfy clothes on. I've got my time set aside. I'm making my way to the couch. And somebody interrupts that. And look out. You have this vacation planned. And everybody, let's say a group vacation, everybody has their plan for that vacation, how they're going to fulfill their desires. Their needs are going to be met. They're going to be fulfilled. And everybody has their idea about how that's going to happen. And then stand in somebody's way and watch the conflict begin. Because everybody's trying to fulfill their own desires. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego are in unity, and they are out to fulfill God's desires. And you'll notice their response to the situation is calm. They're not full of rage. The king, somebody has gotten his way of fulfilling his desires, and he is full of rage because of that. And we respond with anger when our desires of our flesh are not met, and it doesn't always make sense. And people around it can see it, but we just can't see it ourselves. So, we'll try to finish. 16 to 18.
Huh? Oh. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire. And he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up."
So, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego have graduated from Daniel's school. And this is the proof of it, is that they chose God's way rather than their own way, even when it was going to cost them everything. They still chose God's way and trusted God to work it out. And that's what we talked about earlier is that's the faith in a trial. If they're trusting God no matter what.
Don't forget to make them read.
All right, we'll try to finish this with 24 to 25.
No. Yeah.
Is that you?
I think it's your turn, Steve.
What?
You're next.
Yeah.
Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that were tied up and I threw them in the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, your majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of God's." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego came out of the fire. Keep going.
That's good. So, this is God's provision for them. This is His answer to their prayer. This is His response to their faith. The biggest response to His faith, I think, in this is that if we jump ahead all the way to Matthew, where Jesus said, "If you are about my business, if you are reconciling the world to me, if you're going into all the world to make disciples, no matter what, and surely I am with you always." And I think the same promise held to these guys. They were about the purposes of God, not their own flesh, not their own purposes. And God, as He promised, was with them. And notice, it's not that He wasn't watching over there and with them when they're on the ramp, but He's with them when it counts, is in the fire. Is that they had the presence of God with them no matter what. They were about God's business, and when they were about God's business, in a special sense, it's not that His Holy Spirit leaves us when we are apart from Him, or when we sin, or we're not having quiet, whatever. But when we are about God's business and we have His purposes, He's with us. He promises to be with us in a special way. And I believe that's what's going on with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego in the fire. The presence of God was with them in the fiery furnace. So, I'm not sure if we were able to hear any of that, or if we had quite a bit going on today. But I hope we can grab some of the examples of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego, and that we will think on those things and grow in the same way that Daniel and these guys grew. And they were not in easy circumstances.